The welcome address of this ceremony. May I now cordially invite Professor T.R. Ariyaratne, the Acting Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo. Thank you.
Very good morning to all of you. I have the present task of welcoming all our guests and participants for this year's annual research symposium. I think annual research symposium is a very important event in the university, and it is a regular event now in the calendar. So I think it provides the opportunity for our graduates, researchers, research students to present their findings and also discuss them with peers. Now, first of all, let me welcome His Excellency, the retired Major General Qasim Qureshi, the High Commissioner of the Republic of Pakistan, for attending this symposium. Thank you very much, sir, for visiting the University of Colombo and participating in this research conference. Then I would like to welcome Professor Lakshman Jayatilaka, Chairman of the National Education Commission, our keynote speaker, and Dr. Chandra Ambudeniya, former and founder Vice Chancellor of the ULS in University of Sri Lanka, our guest speaker, who have kindly accepted our invitation to deliver these speeches. I also wish to welcome Professor Shanika Iripuregama, Chairperson of the University Grants Commission, for gracing this occasion. Let me also welcome the deans of the faculties, directors of institutes, the acting librarian, the senior and junior academic staff, and the academic support staff, registrar, bursar, senior assistant registrars and assistant registrars, research students and other students, and all our invitees. This, as you all know, this year's theme of the annual conference is Higher Education through State Sector of Sri Lanka in a Competitive Knowledge Economy. I think it's a very relevant for a symposium of this nature. The knowledge economy is emerging mainly due to two factors. That is, the rise in knowledge intensity in economic activities and the increasing globalization. The rising knowledge intensity and the globalization are being driven mainly by the technological advancement and the revolution in the information and communication technologies. This has, in fact, created a paradigm shift in the thinking of higher education policymakers as to how the universities and other higher education institutes should be functioning. The traditional culture of intellectual inquiry and debate in universities has been replaced with the innovations and entrepreneurial cultures. More emphasis has been placed on activities such as university industry links, formation of student companies, and soft skill developments, etc. We can see that Sri Lanka is also now gradually moving in that direction. One of the important driving force in knowledge economies is the research and development, R&D. And I think this is where we face a lot of difficulties. For example, the lack of the state-of-the-art research infrastructure has hampered the growth of scientific research activities in our universities. And unless we take steps to rectify this situation, it will be an uphill task to compete with advanced knowledge economies. In addition, we also need a paradigm shift in our thinking if we are to move forward in that direction. Now, before winding up my welcome speech, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the coordinators and members of all the committees and other officials for successfully organizing this research symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your warm welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, on this very special occasion, may I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Nirmali Pallavatta, the chairperson of the Annual Research Symposium of year 2013.
Chandra Lakshman Vaidyaratna Jayatilakar, an engineer by profession, has a BSc in engineering from the University of Ceylon with first class honours, a diploma of Imperial College from Imperial College, University of London for postgraduate studies in thermal process engineering, and a PhD for research in heat transfer from Imperial College, University of London. He is a fellow of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, a chartered engineer, a member of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers London, and a member of the Sri Lanka Evaluation Association. He, as you may very well be aware, is a very well-known personality, and I hardly need to read out all this. However, I shall highlight a few important aspects. He currently holds the following positions. He is the chairman of the National Education Commission, the chairman of the National Institute of Business Management, chairman, National School of Business Management. He is also visiting professor, Kotalavala Defence University, Sri Lanka, and Professor Emeritus, University of Perak, Kenya. He also has held a large number of positions in the past, out of which I note he has been Chancellor, Wayanada University of Sri Lanka, a Director, Sri Lanka Ceramic PLC, Director, Lanka Volatile PSC, Director, Lanka Volatile NIPE PVT, a Senior Professor of the University of Ruhuna. He has been the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, University of Ruhuna. He has been the Chairman, Presidential Commission on Youth, and Vice Chancellor, University of Perak, Kenya. He has also held numerous positions in other government and private sector-owned engineering and enterprise-oriented organizations, chaired and been a distinguished member of boards, commissions, and advisory committees. A few are member of the University Grants Commission, member National Youth Services Council, member of the Governing Board of the National Institute of Technical Education, member Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission, Vice Chairman, National Authority for Teacher Education, member of the Board of Directors of the United States Sri Lanka Fulbright Commission, member of the Committee to Monitor the Implementation of Higher Education Reforms appointed by the Minister of Education and Higher Education, and member of the National Human Resources Development Council, Presidential Task Force on General Education Reforms, Presidential Task Force on Higher Education Reforms, and Committee to recommend restructuring of Mahapula scholarship schemes. He has been invited to deliver the convocation address in 8 national universities of this country. His contributions to scholarship and to professional development in engineering, teaching and learning, as well as training in engineering are immense, and has been recognized internationally, as evidenced by the many reports, publications, presentations made in the Asia-Pacific region, as well as in Europe. In recognition of his distinguished national service, he has been honored by the Vishwa Prasadini, awarded by the government of Sri Lanka. Professor Jayatilaka has played and continues to play a key role in shaping policy and practice in the education sector of this country. We are greatly honored and privileged to have you serve as our keynote speaker of Annual Research Symposium 2013. I now invite you.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Pakistan, Dr. Chandra Amodenia, the Chairperson of the UGC, Professor Shanika Himurigaman, and my esteemed colleagues in the University of Colombo, and the students who may be represented here. I feel that you are inviting me to this very important occasion of the University of Colombo. It's a recognition of the National Education Commission, the importance of the National Education Commission. And so I will try to tell you something about the general education, the higher education, and to the extent that it will matter here. But also as a keynote speaker, I will try to give you some sense of direction, not only for this important conference, but also for university research. I will base my comments and suggestions to you on my service to the higher education community, to higher education institutions, and to my country at various times. And I would like to first of all start with an idea that as a nation, we have been set back, or we have been adversely affected psychologically by some considerations that are embedded in us, in our common consciousness. One is that we always think that we are a small country. We tend to think like that. Small country next to a big neighbor. And so that makes us think in certain ways which are detrimental to our nation. We are by no means small. Maybe compared to our important neighbor Pakistan, we are small in terms of population. But in comparison to other countries which are doing better, which are progressing, which are economically much more sound than our country, we are in a good club. We are comparable to Australia in population. We are bigger than the Netherlands, which is a very important industrial and post-industrial country. And we are bigger than Portugal and Spain, which colonized us. So this suffering, with the idea that we are small, has, I think, bugged us, made us think small, made us think in a defensive way, made us think in a way that doesn't allow us to help other people, even in our own country. We become insular, and this is very detrimental. That is my first idea. The second idea is that developing or being global, even the Vice Chancellor mentioned about the global economy and the magic of that. Being global, some of us academics and also the people whom we produce as undergraduates or graduates think that being global is to help USA, help UK, and to help other countries which are developed to develop better. So we export our graduates in sizable numbers because that is again a part of our ethos, that being global means helping those countries to develop. We forget that we have a big country here which needs development, and the way we get our graduates to help our country to develop is to make them demand jobs from the government, make them do other things like demand higher salaries, and so many things that are, in a way, seriously detrimental to the nation. So our graduates are really putting a lot of minus marks on our own country and giving a lot of pluses to the developed countries at our own expense. We spend so much, on the average about 10 lakhs or 1 million rupees for every graduate, maybe more for graduates in certain other faculties. So what do? We produce graduates who are educated, trained and fit to develop the developed countries in the West. Very detrimental to our national interests. So my suggestion is that whatever we do as research, education and other development work should be tightly focused on our own country. Because in no other country do the leaders and the serious academics ever think of developing Sri Lanka. They are thinking of themselves. If you listen to the president's inauguration speech in the USA, he said, for Americans. I am working for Americans, he says. So isn't it a bit of a paradox, or maybe you call it a singularity, that we here are thinking otherwise. We do not focus our attention on the needs of the country. And the needs of the country are many. For the 6 decades or so after independence, we have been struggling along. Our agriculture is faltering or doing very weakly, if at all. And then many other things. We are backward still because we are not focusing enough attention on our own country. And then, if that's to happen, the universities must form a strong consortium, a network that looks at the country together and says even divides the development R&D efforts so that they can address the needs of the country in even the faraway places. Needs are not to make us imitate the US or Germany, but the needs are to get a better living standard for our people. And that should be our first and primary focus. And the authorities should have an important role to play in this, because authorities have always valued what is not in the national interests. Clearly. I can show enough examples of this, where the authorities have put weight on certain things that are in fact detrimental to our nation. It is because of this subservience even the authorities have. Because they think that, yes, serving the interests of the USA and UK by publishing in those countries, getting our names in cited journals, and all that is the great thing to do. And we give them, the academics, high marks when we are promoting them. This, I think, I would even in this audience call it stupidity, because we are giving marks to people who are not serving our country. But on the other hand, if our authorities will put high marks on the people who will go to Kalmone, develop that village in so many things, fisheries and other things, and go to the paddy cultivating areas, go to upcountry where they do other things, because this is what makes the country rich. And this is where we can compete on equal terms with other countries. And if we don't do that, by blocking their view, by putting these unnecessary conditions, by publishing in foreign journals, we'll be really ruining our country in the long run. And so the value system has to be revisited seriously with the sole intention of making Sri Lanka work better. In the recent past, maybe in the past few decades, we have seen a significant growth in the higher education sector and also in the tertiary and vocational education sector. Now the tertiary and vocational education sector absorbs about 75,000 or so young people into their institutions. Universities taking about 20,000 or more. And so that is an expansion truly. But then we have to think of what real expansion should be. Recently I visited a university to find out about how it's working. And some people there, responsible people, made some statement. They have even not unpacked some equipment that was brought in to that university. What does it mean? We spend money on buying things, but the idea that we should work with them, use them, is not in our minds. Well, let it be, because there are other things to do. We have to run tutoring classes, we have to do other things, and this is our mentality. So the academics don't spend much time in developing the university. I went to another university where I went to the botany department. I asked, where is a plant house? No, they don't have a plant house. What kind of botany department is that? Botany department have a plant house? Now, these are the questions we have to ask seriously. Are we doing the right thing? Points must be given to the academics. We develop a plant house. We develop a reptilian, what you call herpetarium. We develop other things that are important to the country. Because snake venom is more expensive than gold. So if we can develop the snake industry and develop venom extraction, we can be rich. Why not? There are a lot of, because this is a cobra country in the world. One of the cobra countries. How has any one of you looked at that situation? Have you seen the publication by the Export Development Board about what brings money to this country? I will not be insulting you if I ask you to put your hands up. I study it regularly, because that is where the signals are coming from about what is bringing money to our country. $12 billion come to the country through various exports, and they need your help significantly. You must be there where the action is, and not maybe lecturing to students who will also go back to those places and create wealth for our country and increase those exports and add value to them. And unless we do that, we have been failing as academics. We should even close down the University of Colombo and start it again. That's of course a light remark, but anyway, that's how we should look at this situation. And then again, this idea of the knowledge-based economy. The knowledge-based economy is a special term coined in the recent past, maybe in the late 1990s or early 1990s, to mean a kind of world where people embed, inject, or blend knowledge into whatever is done purposefully. And some of us have the idea that knowledge-based economy is something that uses computers. Everybody is stable as a computer, every household has a computer. No, it's not that. It's not about using computers and IT. It's much more serious. It has to do with economy, the economics of a country. And so, this knowledge-based economy has to have purpose-driven processes in it. And that's where the universities can give leadership. We are the leaders in this kind of economy. Maybe the politicians can give leadership and can give money for us, but then the driving force, the engine that drives, could very well be the universities and other higher education institutions. Because this is where we create people for this knowledge-based economy. Unless we are always conscious of this fact and sensitive to the needs of our students in order to become better performers in the knowledge-based economy, we will be failing in our duty. Now what do our students do? What do some of our academics do? Ask for more, and you find them marching on the streets, doing all sorts of things, but not studying in the university. And research we've done recently some time back says that at least 50% of the students do other jobs, other things that instead of being at the university all the time and reading their books and studying from various sources. Now, what does it mean for the university? It means that it's an inefficient organization. It is not only inefficient, it is driving the students into other very non-knowledge-based economical activities. Maybe they can be partners in a bookie. Not a bad thing because it's all economy driven. But then, as academics, we have to seriously think of this problem. Very seriously think of this problem. Have a debate here. See, what should we do to get these guys to support the knowledge-based economy? Have you ever done that? I don't think so. If it was done, things would have been different. And I'm sure things will be different later at some point of time. So, I don't say that don't do research symposia, but get every one of the academics here to write on a half sheet of paper what they can do to help the students to join the knowledge-based economy. You want to do some research on what the knowledge-based economy is, do some fact-finding about what's happening in the country, in every one of your fields. Use this half sheet to share it to your colleagues. And then form cells that will give you the opportunity to thrash these ideas out. And that's how you can shape university policy to be a knowledge-based economy leader. Until we do that, we have failed. Until we decide to do that, we are nowhere. We are not worthy to be called academics. So, let's do this exercise seriously. One day, take a day of leave maybe and have a little consortium meeting of what the academics can do to make themselves contribute, and also make the students contribute. Because they don't get leadership from you. I have had a discussion with university undergraduates recently in 2 universities. They said that the leadership they get from the staff is dismal. Dismal. Because there's no mixing with them. There's no serious discussion with the students. They live with their own devices. Some of them get sexually transmitted diseases in the process. Some of them start drinking. Some of them do other things. But the academic discourse, the serious, purposeful discourse with the students does not happen. That's why they are left to their own devices. And we start blaming other people. Oh, that group is misleading them. This group. They are being misled because we don't lead them. There's a saying by Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, say if you throw the power in the gutter snipes pick it up. That's what happened to our country. The people who have wield power have dumped it in the gutter. And the gutter snipes have picked it up. Because the students really, they are young people, unspoiled in their minds. That's what I really believe, that young people's minds are unspoiled. They are now being led by things like gutter snipes. So let's think of that as a serious proposition, that the leadership must come from you, from the academics and the researchers who are doing very well in some of this. So that's another thing that I would like to suggest to you, that start giving leadership to the university students. And another thing is about knowledge itself. What is knowledge? It's a very, very important question because right now in the world, there's a very serious discussion about knowledge. And what makes it knowledge, what makes it powerful, what makes people create knowledge, and what makes people use knowledge in whatever they do, is a very important and serious discussion. And all of you who are maybe above the age of 45 should be looking at knowledge itself. That is your duty. Because knowledge is not what is found in books and papers. That is information. Clearly it is information. Because it was created in another time and place, where the atmospheric pressure would have been different, where the ambient temperature would have been different, and where the rainfall patterns would have been different. So knowledge, however purified, however refined it is, it's always there and then stuff. And as academics who are very forward thinking, who are committed, who are well paid relatively, should be thinking of what knowledge is. And analyze this knowledge seriously. Because now there's a strong idea that knowledge is created in a process of working. Well, Mao Zedong said this some time back. He said knowledge comes from labor. Because he realized that knowledge is a creation of the working situation. And we should start believing that. Because as long as we think that knowledge has to be found from someplace else, and it's coming from English-speaking countries, we are really doomed to be underdeveloped, subservient. And this is happening all the time. When we write a paper, we want it published there because we don't want to contradict those people. We want to be recognized by them so that our sabbatical leave will work out. Very petty-minded ambition, but this is how people work. But if we think that knowledge is to be created, we will be challenging the ideas that come from anywhere. Scientific knowledge is created in refutation. That's the fundamental principle about scientific knowledge. But refute what Newton said, refute what somebody else said. Because that's how new knowledge is created. New theories are born. Unless we are in this mindset that challenges what comes here, challenges and seeks research to prove that we are right, we will not be making headway. See, subservience is cutting through. Small country, nothing to do here, no good, we are poor people, and then comes subservience, and there we are, thinking that we should please those masters. Get a stamp of authority from them. They published in some journal out there, it's counted. UGC is to be blamed for that. And the other thing we have to remember is that knowledge-based societies have shared the economic benefits more evenly. Knowledge-based societies, economies, have shared their wealth creation, created wealth more equitably. And as such, the salary differences of people is very narrow. And the more successful knowledge economies really make sure of that. We don't start demanding, because we have PhD plus X and X degrees, we want 15 times the salary of a laborer. No, it doesn't work that way. We have to be talking in terms of not salaries for ourselves, but better salaries for the people who work for us, for the laboratory people, for the non-academic staff maybe. If you do that, you are doing better than just demanding this for yourself. So knowledge-based economies have this very important characteristic, that wealth created by use of knowledge, by being knowledge-based, is shared more equitably. So our sociologists and economists must be studying this phenomenon of how we have got so differentiated, how we have got such wide gaps in our salary structures, and come up with solutions to that problem. It's an issue that is critical, that is also messing up our country in a serious way. Why should those poor people work for us? No, they need not. They are quite happy taking their little bit of land and planting paddy maybe, getting the harvest, and they can eat and be happy. So they share it with us generously, because they are feeling sorry about us. These academic boffins, if they don't get this vegetables we grow, they might go hungry. But think of them too. Then what I noticed again, another thing I noticed about universities is that we do not support them in some important ways. I have found universities which are understaffed by way of support staff and other academic, other personnel, because I'm not blaming the present UGC, but they have been ignoring these requests. Because if we don't create that substrate, infrastructure of very competent people, we can never do good research. Now I will ask a question, you can ask it later. Do you have a good equipment making workshop? You may be arts faculty people, maybe science faculty people, maybe other faculty people, but you need equipment and things. You need physical resources. Thus, you usually have a good workshop. which can create something that you can sketch on a paper and say, I want this equipment produced from it. I went to a laboratory, a workshop in I won't name it. In the basement there was a glass workshop. Not staffed, untidy, badly kept. I don't know how people do research under those circumstances. If you don't have a good glass equipment making workshop, you can't make reactors. You can't do things that are new and novel. You can't innovate, you can't invent. You can just buy things and use them as in laboratories, but that is not the story. It must be a situation where you will come with an idea, I want to measure such and such, I want to study this system, and there must be equipment to match that, your golden brain idea. So if you don't develop your non-academic personnel seriously and purposefully, even give them PhDs, they must match you in every capacity. You will not be doing good research. You will be a dead duck in the knowledge-based economy. Then the other thing I want to mention before I take too much time of you is about how knowledge is shared and percolates into the country. First of all, knowledge is created in the process, labor creates knowledge, and then how does it get shared? Again, as academics, we have created a serious block for the diffusion of knowledge and information and other things into the country. We have created a block as academics. It is deliberate action on our part. I am also blamable, guilty of this. We have been telling everybody, you must know English. We must teach these young people in English, because that's how they get knowledge. We'll go back to the subservience later. But we have been believing this story ourselves. But what has it done to the country for 6 decades? Kept a large majority of people ignorant, within quotes, and not using knowledge in that way. Not capable of using knowledge in that way. So for knowledge to diffuse in a country and to be useful, productive, wealth creating, it must be given in the language of the people, Tamil and Sinhalese. There's no way around this problem. Even yesterday I was talking to the World Bank person. She agreed 100%. She said, yes, you must teach your people in your own languages. Then, an esteemed professor of economics, Professor Laxman, he was speaking to him one day. We both call each other lucky. He said, lucky. There's no other story about this, but we must teach, because the countries which are teaching their people in their own languages are being much better economically. All the examples in Asia, Asian tigers, are all doing that deliberately. I can see 2 reasons. One is that they will be educating their people much better, and they will also be blocking other people coming and spying on them. Yes, you can read the patent documents, but you must know Japanese and Korean to read them. So, these are the ways we must develop ourselves. මම දැන් මේ කියන්නේ ඊට වැදගත් පණිවිඩයක්. ඒකෙන් මම සිංහලෙන් කියන්නේ. මම සාකච්ඡා කරනවා මේ ගැන නිතරම. මම සාකච්ඡා කරනවා ලින්ග්විස්ට්ලත් එක්ක, වාග්වේදීන් එක්ක, වෙනත් අයත් එක්ක, ආර්ථික විද්‍යාඥයන් එක්ක මේ මොකද්ද කරන්න ඕනේ අපේ රට දියුණු කරන්න කියලා. එකක් තමයි අපේ මිනිස්සුන්ට උපාධාරයන්ට පවා අපේ භාෂාවෙන් ගන්න එක. මේක ඔප්පු කරලා තියෙනවා අපි කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. උසස් පෙළ ඕනෑම විෂයක් අපිට උගන්වන්න දෙයක් අපේ භාෂාවෙන්. ප්‍රශ්න පත්‍ර තියෙනවා ලියලා ඒ භාෂාවෙන්. ඒ අනිත් එක කරන්න බැරි. පොත් ලියන්න ඕනේ. ඇත්ත අපි තමයි ලියන්න ඕනේ. කීයක් හරි ලියන්න ඕනේ කියලා කියනවා. ලියන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් මේ පණිවිඩය යන්න ඕනේ අපිට. මේක තමයි වැදගත්ම පණිවිඩය. මම ඒක අන්තිමට තිබේ. මොකද මෙහෙම කරේ නැත්තම් තවමත් ඉස්සරහට මේ කතාව කීක ඉන්නවා. මම මෙතන නවත්තනවා. අසසිල්වරව ස්තුතියි.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your valuable experiences in the higher education sector and for your encouraging remarks.